Today we're going to be making a neon heart. It's going to be pink, so even though you start with blue, you'll see at the end, and it comes in 4-foot tube sections. So everything that we make starts out with a pattern, and we use my blow hose right there. We're going to attach that to the end of the tube, and then on the other end we have a cork so that we can put pressure on the inside of the tube. And we're going to heat that up over a ribbon burner right here. One of the first steps is figuring out how much glass you actually need to heat up, which we use our blow hose as a handy little trick to figure out how much. So you can see I just measure out roughly how much we need, and then I'll measure it up against the tube. I'll mark it with a wax crayon so that I have a mark when I heat it up over the flame for how much I actually need to heat up. Yeah, I put down the camera here for a little bit. But so once we have that marked, we can then head over to the ribbon burner and actually do it. So we're gonna head on over to the ribbon burner, and you can't see the flame in this, but basically you can see my hands. So I'm gonna start rotating that glass right where I marked it, and this slowly over the next couple, I don't know, 15-20 seconds is gonna heat up the glass. And the key is to just keep it moving. We wanna get an even heat all throughout the entire tube, because any cold spots could make it bend kind of funky. And once that glass is actually heated up, it takes almost just, I don't know, 10 seconds or less for it to start firming up again. So you got to act quick once it is starting to warm up. And right here you can see that it's starting to get a little bit loose, which means that it's heated up. It's starting to act a little bit more like a wet noodle. And like I said, once I get close, it's very field dependent. Once I get close, I'm just going to go ahead and bend that right up. There's Sky in the background. She's one of my partners that comes in and works with me, so you don't die, you know, because you're working with hot glass. But see, there you go, simple bend. And so then we move right into the next one. So now that I've got that lined up with my pattern, I'm gonna go ahead, mark the next section. This one I don't need my tube because it's pretty straightforward, but yeah. And so something that you'll notice as we move through this entire piece is that you get into some awkward shapes to hold. Not everything is just a straight tube. So you have to change up the methods. And so that's something you learn throughout this class is you get comfortable with being uncomfortable with how you're holding the glass. You just hold it in whichever way it's gonna let you. And so if you have to do this, you have to flip-flop it. I mean, that's the way you're gonna do it. If you can do a full 360 spin, that's cool, whatever works. But yeah, just laying it up against the pattern. Yeah, so we're going to mark out right here one of the bends that's going to be one of the feet for this heart so that it can stand on its own once we're actually done with it. And you'll have to do this part first just because otherwise you're going to end up with tubing running into tubing, and it's really hard to bend things when they're all super duper tight, close quarters. So we actually are going to bend this back in what's called a double back, which essentially is just a tight U. Yeah, that will allow us to work more freely with the other parts once we get there. And it's right about at this point that I can feel the glass start to give, and whoop, there we go. There's the double back. And so measuring it up against the pattern, mark the next section and move on. It's just repeat and keep doing that process over and over again. Mark the amount of glass you need, heat it up, bend it into place. It sounds simple, but working with glass is such like a feel thing. And so you'll notice that throughout the video that it looks simpler than it actually is. And so right now I'm marking out that next section, swapping my hose side because we're actually going to do a tighter bend here. We are doing the crease in between the two mounds of the heart because you can't just do a simple like down and back. You have to loop it because the plasma needs to go through the entire tube, so you can't crimp it. So here we are, just going to heat that up and do that bend. And yes, the hose definitely does get in the way sometimes. You learn to loop it up around your hands for certain things, but this time around I just decided to go for it anyways. It didn't really matter. But yeah, it can get in the way. And yeah, sometimes you can see we just do, I don't know, kind of funky stances because it's awkward to hold a piece of glass and rotate it all the way around. So I don't know, we'll squat, we'll lean, kind of rock with the piece. I don't know, it's kind of funny, but it's fun. And yeah, so there is our back, double back. We're lining it up against the paper. Here is kind of where I'm realizing, yeah, I did not drop it close enough to the paper. So I'm going back right here to heat up the glass just a little bit more in the hopes that I can kind of fix it and save it and bring it back down to the paper. The way that this works is you bend everything, and as long as you have everything flat on the paper and all of your bends above the paper, then you can hide all of the bends and stuff on the back end of the piece, and only what's front facing, like aka like what's flat on the paper, is going to actually show towards the person, if you're going to use that black paint to like black out the rest of it. And so here I think I was successful in dropping it down to the paper, and so then we're going to go on to our next bend, which would be the other half of the heart. So now we've got one half pretty much completely done, and we're just going to go back and work on the rest of it, which is, well, just doing the exact same thing but on the other half. And then here is where you're going to start to see that, yep, we loop around some funky shapes, and you just kind of get used to it. But it definitely is fun to look at sped up, that's for sure. And I'll cut out sections of the video where it's just me flipping it back and forth until something's actually happening. So like right here, we are almost hot enough that I can put the heart together, because you can see I tried and then it didn't really work out. So now I'm just trying to heat it up extra to make sure that I can actually get this heart in the shape that I need it to be, which is a little bit more difficult than you'd think it would be. Obviously it's now kind of like a hot rope, and so you can't touch it because glass is 1800 degrees and you don't want to get 3rd-degree burns. But so there we are, lining up against the pattern. That right there is an insulative brick, which basically allows me to press the glass flat down to the table without burning myself or having such a drastic temperature change that it's going to crack the glass. And so now I'm grabbing my tube, going to do another type bend. Just there you go, see, partway done. And we're going to finish up this last section of bending before we can actually get to the legs and then processing it. And so now I think you can see what I was kind of getting at earlier when I was talking about those legs of the piece, to help hold it up. There's the heart, and then those like legs, I'm going to keep calling them, I'm actually going to twist upward. Well, as it currently is positioned, I'm going to twist them upward so that the piece can lean back on them while it's just freestanding. And so I'm marking up that piece, and I will just do that over the ribbon burner. And you can do tighter bends on the crossfire there to the left of me. Well, my right in the video, your left as you're viewing this, but I just did it on the ribbon burner because I didn't have that crossfire lit. Yeah, so I'm just going to heat that up. There you go. You can see that bend, putting it on the paper, trying to make sure that it's as flat as it can be. And yeah, so that's how it's going to kind of look once it's fully done. Me checking to see how hot the glass is. That is something that you learn very quickly how to do. You just quickly tap. Don't want to touch anything for too long because it could be very hot. Glass doesn't have a color indication for hotness level, unless it's like really hot. Oh, and right there, you're gonna see me go, oh shoot, I broke it. But oh well, because you can fix that. So in order to fix that break that happened, we take a file, we take the edge of it right there, and we're actually gonna end up cutting both parts of the glass. Since I broke it on a bend, you gotta cut it so that they're both straight pieces of glass, and then we're gonna perform what's called a weld. It's not like, well, it is kind of like metal welding, I guess. Yeah, you're just heating up the glass super duper hot, and then you're going to put it together. And this is a process that you get very familiar with as you're making neon. You learn how to cut glass super duper quickly, and you learn how to be comfortable with just, I don't know, broken glass in general. It's a softer glass, it's called borosilicate glass, but yeah, I don't know, it's just very interesting to handle. After a while, it kind of feels like plastic glass, but yeah, so we're just gonna move on to that weld. So during a weld, it's just kind of like a bend. You rock both pieces back and forth, got to make sure they get evenly heated. You'll see, like, as I'm bending, that the ends get kind of red hot, and then I'll carefully push them together, mush them a little bit, and then I'll pull it out of the fire, pull it apart, and blow. And that's just to help keep the diameter of the glass consistent and even, and that is a good weld right there. And so now that we're done with the main body of the piece, we got to put on what's called electrodes. There's tubulated, non-tubulated. We put them on the ends using this holder, and that's kind of how we start to get it light up. And so now you can see that I've got the electrodes put on. It's just another welding process, so it's the exact same. So I didn't want to record that again. It's just the same. And then over there is where we actually process the unit, which is the next thing that I'm going to end up showing you. So this is called a manifold, and the whole process is called bombarding. So we'll go through all these different steps today as we are working and making the piece. So yeah, we've got two different types of gas. The piece attaches through this tube right here, which will eventually hook up, and it helps pull it under a vacuum and follow all the steps, which I'll explain as we get going. Moving on, our first step, fire polish tubulation, and that's good. Attach the piece. Yep, cool. Check. We got that all attached right there. Then our third step, open the vacuum, which is right here. Just open this valve. It's pretty simple. It's just like a stopcock. Twist it, it opens. Use the Tesla coil to test for leaks. So that's the next thing we're gonna do. So it's actually, I'm gonna let you listen to this audio. It goes zap zap, and right now the tubing is blue, but once you pump it with neon gas, it'll turn pink. So right now I'm just checking for leaks, and yeah, I'll let you listen to that audio. And since I didn't have any leaks, you don't get to see what they looked like, but so we're all good with that. Insert mica, which is just a thin layer of rock, which helps prevent the electricity from jumping from the end to end, which right at the base there in between, potentially the electricity could try and burst through, which would break the piece. So that's why we put the mica to prevent it. And next we're gonna go over here and we're gonna grab a piece of paper, and paper burns at 451 degrees, hence Fahrenheit 451, which helps indicate how hot our tube actually is during this process. This process essentially zaps the piece with a bunch of electricity, so it heats up the glass. So we're all good there. We've checked it for leaks, it's all set. Our next step is going to be to open up that, or close that vacuum, my bad. Close that vacuum, and then this is called the dead man hold button, basically because you need both hands to zap it. And that's a big 1.5 million volt transformer that we're going to zap it with. Yeah. So I'm over here, I'm just attaching the leads for that crazy strong transformer. And then, so you can see it's blue. Essentially, we're sustaining a lightning bolt within that tube to heat up all the particles and vaporize them. This is just the first one, so it gets warmer, and this is mostly taking out the water. And so then we're gonna open up that vacuum to suck all of that out. And so now that we're letting that tube cool to about 122 degrees, basically just, is it warm to the touch? Yep, I'm holding it, it's pretty good. Then we can move on to the next step, which you close up that vacuum. And then this next step, we close the U-gauge. There's just a bunch of nozzles on this thing that we all use. They do different things. It's hard to explain. It's super scientific. I mean, I'm sure I'm already getting more scientific than most people would. This next part, we have to let in a little bit of atmosphere, which is to help with the bombarding process. So I'm gonna hand this over to Sky. Yep, so as you can see here, I'm gonna pinch that little tubing, and I'm gonna ever so slightly let that water rise up, or well, it's liquid, but you saw that. So it slightly rises up, and then I open the main vacuum and bring it back down. I don't understand the science, but that's what you do next. Just right there within that bombarding range is ideal. And then we're good to go. We're gonna absolutely zap this thing and for like a minute.
Okay, go for it.
So while we're zapping this thing, we're bringing it up to about 500 degrees to vaporize anything else that isn't water that's inside the tube. And that vacuum pulls all the impurities out of it, because this only works if the tubing is pure. So that's what we're doing. We're just processing it. And so that paper is going to start to smoke. I'll start to see some things on the gauges. And then also Sky here with the fantastic camera work is gonna zoom in over here, and you can see that pretty soon here is where the electrodes are going to start to actually change. They undergo like a chemical process because of the heat where they basically start turning cherry red. And so that is your indicator that your piece is pretty much good being bombarded, and you're good to let it cool down after that. But once the process is actually done and we decide that, yep, all right, cool, we've bombarded far enough, you can actually just let it go, cool it all down, fill it with gas. And so we'll get to that pretty soon here. And also on another note, recording video or taking pictures of neon sucks. Like, it is so difficult. Like, that's not the true color, but oh, okay, there you go. So you can see the cherry red on the electrodes now. So that's good. And then we'll continue from here. So yep, we're gonna open up that vacuum like I was mentioning, which then allows us to suck out all the impurities that were inside of it. So now it's pretty much as clean as it's gonna get. And so we're gonna let it cool down. 1, 2, 3, ouch. That was Tom, my professor's way of telling us not to touch things for too long. That's our temperature gauge. And so now that it's all cool, we can actually fill it with gas. So red is for neon, and blue is for argon. Those are just like their natural colors. So we're gonna fill it up here. You see the tube size, 10 millimeter. So we're gonna turn that dial until about 10 o'clock is where the gas starts to release. And we're gonna watch that right on that right side. That fluid will start to rise towards the 10 millimeter once the unit is being filled with gas. So you go very slowly because you don't want that fluid to shoot up way too high. So there you go, you can see it rising, 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 getting pretty close. Oops, I closed it just a little bit too early. Got to open it up just a little bit longer. I mean, and it's obviously not an exact science. Like, that card is just held up by a clip onto the side of this manifold. But it's close enough, which is what matters. And yeah, so then our next step is we actually are going to come over here and we're going to pinch off, or well, we call it tipping it off. So I use this hand torch. I'm heating that glass up till it's pretty much molten. I'm pulling it away so that the molten glass doesn't get pulled into the piece by the vacuum. And then I'm just heating up that little tip right there so that it's just a ball, so it's not super duper sharp and could like poke someone or break. You don't want it to break, obviously. And so the last steps are just to relieve the pressure, basically. So we open up that U gauge, it drops it, open up this atmospheric orifice, and that just releases the pressure, and then we're good to go. So then we're gonna come over here, we're gonna test it out. And as you can see, bam, it lit up pink. So that's because the neon is naturally red, and this tube is called rich blue. So it naturally wants to try and turn pink. So that's a super cool effect. Yeah. So now I'm just gonna take you on a little stroll throughout our area. So this is the neon lab. We've got just a ton of tables, workspaces. Right here I painted the legs of the piece so that you can only get the color from the heart itself, not the legs. So these are one of the workbenches with all the torches. Someone from the other class made a shark. Our critique is going to be in a few days. Sky is over there painting all the different back bends. They made a math equation. This kid made a skateboard covered in neon. We just have a whole bunch of different neon stuff all throughout the room. All the pieces that are lit up, all those like rectangular ones, are ones that Tom made. They are like the first project of the year. That's a mountain that Corey made. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of show you that it's crazy in here, and thanks for joining.